Monadnock region, except this time, for once, one of the only times ever, it's actually the morning here in the Space Lounge. But welcome, nonetheless, to another fabulous episode of GOMO Tonight, the Monadnock region's only locally focused, not that weekly, but periodic comedy podcast. So this morning, hey, it's Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day to our service members. It'll be Diwali tomorrow, so happy Festival of Light to those who celebrate. And we're here in the morning in the Space Lounge. I'm your host, Chris DiLoretto, with my lovely co-host,
Zoe Rotenheim-Smith.
And a very special guest today, Mike Jackman of Jackman Radio. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Nice to see you.
You're very welcome. I think that this is kind of like long overdue.
It's the most ambitious crossover since Infinity Wars.
I completely agree. It was like, got to be like 6 months or almost a year ago, Kevin Brace was like, you really got to be aware of these guys. Like you guys got to cross over and collaborate. And I'm glad that the streams came together here.
Yeah, me too, definitely. There's a great local scene, man. There really is, and I think eventually the scenes, they diverge and they find each other.
Indeed, exactly. Important lesson for those of you out there. Perhaps some good advice to take. But yeah, it's actually, we have been saying that we kind of hate the month of November typically, but sometimes November can be kind of lovely. I really hate the cold, but it's not that bad out there. I don't know how you feel about it.
I don't mind the cold. Most of my family's from Newfoundland, Canada, so we kind of.
Oh, right, yeah.
I tell people my father was born on an iceberg, So the snow and the ice, I'm not so big on. But yeah, I think winter is a little bit too long around these parts. It could maybe be like 3 months shorter.
I completely agree. Pretty out there right now, though.
It's beautiful, man. November is beautiful right now, and we had a lovely October. October is my favorite month.
Oh, nice.
It is the month of my birth, but
I was going to say, yes, you have a strong ties to October.
Yeah, I do love the fall time in New England. I know it's a bit stereotypical and a little cliche, but hey, we got people.
There's a reason. Yeah.
I mean, we have people from all over, guys, coming to look at our dead leaves, our dying leaves.
Completely true.
Right?
Completely
it's a cottage industry.
Yeah, we took a stroll this morning around the Cathedral of the Pines in Rindge, the town of the future. There was at least a couple of really pretty trees that were still hanging on to like one layer of yellow leaves left.
Oh yeah,
pretty, yeah.
But usually I've thought November was like ugly and cold.
It can be depressing.
But the snow at least kind of brightens things up, and so that's kind of why November has been so not my favorite month that I planned my children so that they would not have birthdays in November. That was my number one goal. I was like, they just can't be born in November because I don't know if I can love them enough if they have this birthday. But this year, I'm changing my feelings.
The seasonal depression is real. It's a very real thing.
It is. Yeah. But totally. I like, as the years have gone on, I have learned to start supplementing with vitamin D, as October winds down and then we shift those clocks, I get a little prep from that, because I am on the other hand, my ancestors are not from anywhere where it is cold. Well, I shouldn't say that. They're actually from mountainous regions in Italy. So it isn't always warm.
It's still sunny.
Sunny
than here.
Sunny. Not like November here, And so I am a bit of a creature of the sun. And so when I start getting depleted, it's obvious to me. You know what I mean? So it helps though to just give myself a little dose of the artificial sun.
Have you guys ever been to Italy to visit, or? No,
believe it or not, my parents are there right now for the first time ever. It's like the trip of a lifetime for them.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So I hope to follow in those footsteps someday as well. But yeah, good for them. Shout out to mom and dad out in Amalfi today. My dad's birthday tomorrow, actually. So happy birthday, Dad.
Oh, cool. Happy birthday, Mr. DiLoretto. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was in Italy for 4 days at age 15, and hearing about his parents' trip, I'm just like, man, that was wasted on me. I gotta go back. I was I remember a few little things, and I'm like, man, there's just so many things I didn't know about, didn't know to care about. So
yeah,
have to try again sometime.
Yeah, that happens when you're younger, when you go to places. Like, I remember when I was younger, I went to New York City and D.C., and I didn't totally appreciate the scope of it. And
Yeah,
but now that
totally.
I'm older, I don't really like going to the city that much. I'll be honest. I'm a bit of a country boy these days.
Yeah, I hear that.
Peterborough, I love being here in Peterborough though, guys. It's a great spot. It's a
Yeah, and
great
actually,
spot.
so that's a good segue here because I know that you are, and it's a dangerous thing to say. Some people, kind of may even go like a discrimination kind of route, But I know, like myself, I don't mean to out you, but like you are a Massachusetts boy.
I was born there. I lived there for the first 10 years of my life.
Yeah. So how did you wind your way to Peterborough? Did you move up here at 10, or did you how was your journey?
Yeah, so we actually moved to Rindge when I was 10. I grew up in Rindge.
Oh,
You
okay.
mentioned Rindge earlier, yeah.
Town of the future.
It really is. I mean, you can't get any land there these days. There's no real estate. It's hard to get a house there, I guess. We moved from the Framingham, Ashland, Massachusetts area, just outside of Boston when I was 10, and grew up in Rindge, and then I lived in Jaffrey for a couple of years, and now I've been here in Peterborough since 2017.
Yeah,
So
nice.
I found my way here, and I live with my brother here in town, and I feel really lucky and fortunate to live here in this part of the world where, we live in relative peace, and it's safe, and there's low crime, and it's it's a high trust situation here. I don't take that for granted because there's
Me either.
a lot of places on the planet that are not they're violent, and well they're just it's not really solid ground.
Yeah.
A lot of people struggling all over the world, so I don't take that for granted one bit.
Whew, yeah. Tough. It's a tough world out there. No joke. And somebody was just accusing me last night online of like hating it here or something, which I think is an incredibly superficial reading of my occasional or frequent criticism. Because I do love it here. I'm very much here by choice. For all of the reasons that you mentioned. I mean, and there is something I think a little bit. There's a special spark in this town for whatever reason. I've heard theories. There's multiple theories. But who knows what the real truth is? As we'll talk about later in this episode, oftentimes the real truth can be a little murky, right? But I think that there's something very special here, and it tends to gather the right people together.
Yeah, I don't get the David Lynch vibe, like where it's a nice small town on the surface, but underneath it's very dark, and Jack Ruby could be hanging around. I don't get that vibe in Peterborough, but
there's no darkness here. There's some snobbery, you know what I mean? Like there's some waspiness.
I was gonna say class tension.
Yeah, sure. There's definitely, but like there's no, you never get the vibe that there's like an underbelly. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
you ever been to Shaw's on a Saturday at 2:00? Here's your class.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely.
What are you doing in my store, peasant?
Seriously, yeah, no.
I am a Market Basket man. I'm going to just put that out there. I worked there for 4 years.
Absolutely.
Throw me back in the casket. I worked there for 4 years.
I worked there myself. I worked there for about a year.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it's a very humbling, a very enlightening experience that more people should experience.
Yeah, I've worked at multiple supermarkets, and actually Market Basket was by far the best to work for.
Yeah, they when I worked there, man, I got to say, for a job, they paid you pretty well for a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid.
Sure.
And I think what it was eventually, though, I got tired of not being allowed to grow a beard.
I know, they have those George Steinbrenner rules.
You can have the ridiculous stash, but you can't have a beard.
My hair would be too long right now.
Yeah.
If I worked there still. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, for real.
Totally. And then there was that great documentary a few years ago, the Arthur T versus Arthur S, billionaire versus billionaire. Remember that?
Yep.
It's like,
I actually worked there like the year before that whole debacle. Like, so I had kind of recently departed at the time.
Did you work at the one?
I still had a lot of former coworkers that were there in Rindge, actually.
Oh, you worked at the one in Rindge too?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked there from 03 to 07, so back in high school.
Yeah, this was like 2013, 2014.
Oh, so more recent. Cool.
Yeah, more recent. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, it was a good experience ultimately, and it taught you. And I always had money in my pocket, man, to go to the movies or go out for a dinner. Back before gas was $4 a gallon. When I was in there, it was $2 a gallon. Okay,
Yeah, I always felt that the just the culture of Market Basket, because I worked multiple different grocery chains in life, other retail as well, and typically, in retail, there's not a lot of respect given from say supervisor to employee, and I just felt at Market Basket they really showed you a modicum of respect and decency at all times that went a long way and was unusual. It was remarkable, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you had to wear a dress shirt and a tie, and you had your schmuck. I mean, I did a year up front. I did 3 years in produce, and
nice.
I couldn't really party for the first half of college because I had to be at the produce department every Sunday at 6 a.m. to open it up, take a truck, make sure things were good. So, it taught me some early life lessons. That's not to say I never went in hungover. And
yeah, of course. Yeah, right. No, again, go in there today at 6, on a Saturday.
On a Saturday, yeah, got to be a little drunk.
You'll see some sluggish folks. You'll see a couple sluggish managers.
Yeah, I mean it's a grind. It's these people give their lives to that career. My store manager at the time was there from he said he worked on his wedding day. I mean that's commitment.
Oh, I think we we probably had the same. What was his name? We probably had the same manager.
It was Mr. Doobie.
Oh yeah. He was there for 30 years, wasn't he?
It's a legend. Yeah, he was there for a long. He's like, I swear, you kids go off to college, you come back, you just stupider. You just become stupider. I loved it when he would throw those insults. That's like old school, like Massachusetts style. We got pork chops here, $4.99 a pound. We got cigarettes for our Massachusetts shoppers. Cartons of cigarettes, $17.99 a carton. You'd get on that mic and really sell it.
Yeah, no,
I loved
absolutely.
it. I loved it.
Yeah, he was a classic archetypal Market Basket store manager.
Oh, totally. He lived it. He lived it on his sleeve. I saw him one time chase out a guy who was stealing a bunch of steaks under his shirt. He freaking chased the dude all through the store and out the front. And then we were watching the footage of it. It's like, come on, man. You don't have that. You don't have that anymore.
I know.
I'm glad that Roy's has changed hands, and the people who are getting it now are kind of on board with the old school vision. I'm really glad to see that. We need more smaller family businesses, neighborhood type places.
I was just about to ask you if you had been into the new Roy's.
I haven't been since it's changed hands. Have you?
I have, yeah. Yeah, they spruced it up in there. It's nice.
Nice.
Mostly the same, but I don't know, extra friendliness bubbling out.
Yeah, and a bit of a a wipe down.
A reboot.
It smells better. I'll just say.
Okay, I get what you're saying, and I guess they're gonna do something with Little Roy's, and they're gonna open up a cafe or a coffee spot where
that's what I'm hoping.
Heard, yeah.
That's what I'm hoping. Yeah. That's nice to hear because it is I'll be honest. I was never blown away by Little Roy's when it was open before, but it's just kind of a bummer to have that space just sitting there totally closed. Downtown. It's nice spot.
Yeah, it got decimated by the Flu World Order.
It did.
Pardon me.
Yeah, that's the one we're hoping will be an afternoon coffee shop.
Yeah, right. Which might be too much to hope for, but you never know.
I'm still hoping.
You never know.
What type of coffee shop?
It's one that's open in the afternoon.
Oh yeah. We'll see.
So hard to get a cup of coffee late in the day in this town.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't drink coffee. I'm a tea guy myself.
Oh yeah. Well, you can't really get a cup of tea late in the day in this town either.
No, I just make my own. I do Irish. I make Irish tea here, and I'm trying to get off soda. I've been trying to kick soda. I've been pretty successful the last couple of weeks.
I can't. I have a major soda weakness.
Yeah, it's bad. I just need a little taste every day.
Every day.
Yeah, exactly. No, I feel you. Yeah, Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper are my sodas of choice. But
yeah, have you ever? So as a tea drinker though, because I spent a couple of years working in a great tea shop in Boston, and this is 20 years ago. But have you ever been to the Cozy Tea Cart in Brookline?
No.
There's a person who knows her tea. I have never seen, actually, to this day, because the tea place I used to work at in Boston's gone, and I have never been to one except for her shop that has that level of like quality selection and expertise. I mean, she's got relationships in the Himalayas and whatnot, and goes over, which is kind of what you need for like the real good stuff. But it's worth it, and they do ship online too, because the hours can be tough because they close by like 6 o'clock every day.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Yeah, that's pretty customized.
Yeah, it's cool. Have you ever been to the Alamo in Brookline, the barbecue place?
No, I've been to. I think it's called Blue Ribbon. I don't know if that's in Brookline.
I don't know either.
I think it's called the Blue Ribbon. It was a pretty popular barbecue place down near Boston.
Oh no, this is Brookline, New Hampshire.
Oh, Brookline, New Hampshire. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Brookline, New Hampshire.
No, I haven't. How long has that place been there for?
Maybe 5 years. It's in a place where there's been a number of restaurants over the years that have turned over. But
was the Country Corral in there before, in the Chinese restaurant?
Because there. No, it used to be. There was like a place called Riverside was in there, and then there was something in between Riverside and the Alamo. But it's also near. It's right on Route 13, and right by. Probably don't know this either, but Tobacco Haven. It's an old. It's the first place I ever bought tobacco. Used to be a shack by the side of the road, and now it's this gigantic like Vice Plaza with like a convenience store with like cigarettes and beer, cigars and other stuff in the tobacco part, and a New Hampshire liquor store. So
that's they're like Times Square in Brookline.
Seriously, and then kind of like diagonally up the road is the Alamo, and across from the Alamo is the tea shop. So there's like a few, and there's like a Greek place nearby too.
Wow.
So yeah, it's weird because you don't think of Brookline like it's kind of like a town that you drive through, for the most part. No offense, Brookline, but they actually have like a few really great spots that are worth stopping at.
And the sculpture park.
Yeah, which I still haven't been to.
Yeah, I got it.
Have you?
Today. Oh yeah, I've been there.
Oh, cool. Yeah, they have this like crazy free just like sculpture hike park.
There's like different hikes you can do, and there's like a
big
sculptor studio. I think they have like visiting artists, and they just have like installations throughout the woods, so you can.
Andres, right?
Yes.
Andres Institute of Art.
That sounds great. That'll be see. Really cool. Let's go. You guys are totally.
I grew up right over the border in Townsend, which is also 1.5 towns removed from the border of Rindge. I think of it as the border though because I grew up in West Townsend, just off of 119. So to get to the border with Rindge is like kind of like a 15-minute straight shot from my parents' house. So I think of it as like, yes, just over the border, but literally over the border from Brookline, which is part of why I have known of all of these places. But
wow,
yeah,
those are like hidden gems in the area.
Totally.
I spent a pretty good amount of time in Townsend as a kid because one of my mother's childhood friends did live there for years.
Nice.
So we would go there, and they owned a video store back in the 90s. So I got to see the original Scream when I was like 9 or 10 years old for the first time, and that kind of helped birth my love of horror films.
Was that Harbor Video by chance, or was it Dave's Video? There was a couple of.
Probably Harbor. It was in a plaza, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I think that was Harbor Video.
And this would have been probably 94, 95, 96.
Sure. Yeah, so it was there. Yeah, for sure.
So they had, and this is all VHS back then, of course.
That was our video rental store for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there was Blockbuster in Fitchburg, but like most of the time you wouldn't drive. We growing up in Townsend, you do kind of drive to Fitchburg and Nashua for like a lot of things,
Yeah.
But, like, your parents wouldn't necessarily take you to Fitchburg just to go to Blockbuster. You would go to Blockbuster if you were already there. Otherwise, you would go down to Harbor Video. It's a nice video store.
Yeah. Did you guys ever go to Torrey's, the sub place? I think it's in Leominster. And they
I
have
don't think so.
They have a new my dad used to take me when I was a kid, and I thought they closed, but I recently found out that they opened a different location under another name, but it's the same business. So
Oh, no shit.
I'm definitely pining for one of their steak and cheese subs.
Oh, I would love to have that. Yeah,
I'm hoping,
Leominster's got good food.
I'm hoping it's good.
Yeah.
You know, I like
What do they call it now?
I forget what the new name is. So I'll have to look that up. But I've always loved the Italian spot on Central Street in Leominster, Il Camino.
Oh yeah, I've been there. I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
it's real old school. Like everything's still old. Like the chairs, the upholstery, the carpet.
Yeah.
I think they've been there since the 50s, 40s or 50s or something, and it's been family owned.
Yeah, they used to have this place called Monty's Garden. Do you remember that place? That was like
that sounds familiar.
That was right downtown, and it was like upstairs in this place, like super old school Italian joint, and like that was kind of like the place. That was like a big deal. Like if you took somebody out to Monty's Garden, like there's a thing, but it's gone now. I don't know what happened, but it didn't last. I mean, I think it had been there forever, but like it, had its day.
Well, the hidden gems, you can still dig them up and find them. And it sounds like you guys, one of the things I like about what you do is you highlight and talk about stuff locally that might be off the beaten path or you might not know about. And
absolutely,
that's quality stuff and quality.
We try to find it.
Yeah, it's around.
Yeah, exactly.
It's around.
Exactly. So, how did you tell us about like the genesis of Jackman Radio, like how and what you guys do, and how that has all shaped over time what you did?
Yeah, I mean, so I went to Keene State College, class of 2009 Owls.
Nice.
And I did a little bit of a podcast when I was in college for the Equinox, which was the newspaper, and this would have been 2008, 2009.
Nice.
And then after I graduated, I wanted to start my own podcast, but I'll be honest, I'm not the most technologically savvy person. So I had the idea, and then in 2012, I tried to get it off the ground, and it languished. And then finally in 2015, a coworker of mine had his own podcast that was winding down, and we became friends, and he ended up coming on as our first producer. So he really helped us get off the ground. He knew everything with microphones and recording and sound equipment and editing. So 2015, we got off the ground early that year, and kind of around the time of the GOP primary, was when we really started kicking into high gear. Covering Trump.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Interesting primary, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the real GOP clown circus with Trump and Jeb and Ted Cruz and of course Hillary was running against Bernie. So we were doing shows quite often.
Yeah, exciting. Yeah, right. That's a great time to get going.
That was a great era. Yeah. So we were recording back then in Jaffrey. We lived on a bungalow at the Grandview Inn in Jaffrey for 2 years. So
wow.
That's where Jackman Radio was born, up there.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It was awesome.
That's a good spot of origin.
Yeah. So it started off as audio only, and then in the last couple of years, we've introduced a live stream component through our YouTube channel. And, I studied politics in college, got my degree in that, studied history, have always been into politics and current events. So I guess that's the real foundation of the podcast. And we like to throw in some comedy stuff there too, and pop culture, film, books. We interview journalists, anybody that we're interested in. If we read a book and we can get in touch with the author and we can get them on for a chat, we try to do that. And then in the last election cycle, 2020, we filmed a series at Post and Beam Brewing here in Peterborough, where we sat down with as many presidential candidates as we could get to come in person. And,
which was kind of a big deal. I mean, that was my first exposure. I mean, I remember that.
Cool.
That made the rounds for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was actually mostly in 2019, and then of course, lockdowns happened, and in March of 2020, so that put the kibosh on any in-person stuff at all. That's really when Jackman Radio kind of went fully, like we're doing here, streaming. I prefer in-person, talking to people in person, but.
We would have invited you over, except we had, this is our
well, we would have been all bunched up together.
That's what I mean. And the other setup, which I was missing a cord for, we have 2 mics, not 3. You know what I mean? So it's a logistical, but I'm with you. And one day we'll have the capability to have guests in because we do have space for it here in the lounge.
Oh, we could. I'd love to have you guys on Jackman Radio too. We'll do a.
Absolutely.
We'll have you guys on too. But I love talking to old friends. We had our first family member on. We had my great uncle on, who's a Kempo master.
Yeah, I saw that. I haven't had a chance to listen yet, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so we like to talk to anybody that we're like interested in, or an area that interests us, or we're passionate about. And I'll talk to any presidential candidate: Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green. I mean, Libertarian. We've talked to. Our first big interview we did was Jill Stein. Actually, we went to her house down in Massachusetts.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
hung out with her for 3 hours, and she,
she's an interesting lady.
She is. Yeah, I like her. We call her Base Plant Lady. That's one of the nicknames. And she's actually running again. She just announced she's.
I just saw that. Yeah, somebody Jill Stein's back again. I mean, I like her well enough. I am sort of like, all right, I don't. Did anybody, I know the Greens need a candidate, so I'm not surprised, because, Cornell was running as a Green, and then I think personally that he got scared that he could generate too many Green votes because they have ballot access, and so he hopped off.
Aren't they on 35 or 40 states or something?
Yeah, they're on most of the states. Yeah, they have. Yeah, so it's if you are a popular figure that can kind of garner that kind of attention, and you are worried about being a spoiler, not a good place to hang out, really.
Well, I like what RFK Jr. is saying. He's like, yes, I'm going to be a spoiler. I hope to spoil it for both of them.
For both sides. Yeah, and if you see those growing numbers, that's like within striking distance at the moment. Obviously, Election Day is a year away, but it's kind of remarkable, I think.
I mean, he's beating Trump and Biden in two different maybe more than that, among 18 to 45-year-olds.
Straight up.
And independents, straight up independents. And no third-party candidate has ever had this amount of support a year out from the general. So that's huge.
Yeah, it is huge. It is huge. And, I think to kind of segue into our next and sort of main subject, something like that can carry risks along with it, I think. And, I say that to bring us to the event that Monadnock Underground and GOMO and Jackman Radio are doing in partnership. So, this episode will probably come out on Monday the 13th. So this Friday the 17th, the place you want to be, Friday night, 7 p.m. To 10 p.m., 1833 room at the Peterborough Town Library. 60 years of the Unspeakable, an examination of JFK's legacy of his assassination. We're going to do a film screening of a documentary relevant to the subject from a director known for his film on the subject. And then we're going to have a little discussion afterwards. And, this came about because, of course, it's the 60th anniversary. It's a big deal. Don't want to pass it by. There's a lot of stories in the media, but I don't feel like I'm seeing a lot of events necessarily that people are doing, or even commemorative kind of things. So Mike and I have been interested in this for many years. So I don't know if you want to talk about your, kind of how this came to be something that you were interested in, passionate about.
It has to be back in middle school. I was having a discussion with my Uncle John, who grew up in Boston. And I don't know if he brought it up or he told me about back in the 70s, he was out near the water and he saw a boat, and the name of the boat was Who Killed JFK? And that kind of sparked his interest in the whole thing. And he became kind of a student of the assassination, and was telling me about a man who worked in the military named L. Fletcher Prouty, who's, of course, the character of Man X, played by Donald Sutherland in JFK, is based on Fletcher Prouty, who worked in military intelligence, worked in the Pentagon, was a liaison, with the Presidential Protective Detail and, the military and intelligence agencies. So he spent many years on the inside, in these meetings and looking, at operations and being involved in operations. And he, wrote a book about it, I think just called JFK, or maybe it was called JFK in Vietnam, or no, that was John Newman. But anyways, my Uncle John told me about this guy and told me a little bit about the assassination when I was a middle schooler. and that just kind of sparked my interest in it. And since then, I've just been in that space, And there's been so many amazing. And for you, didn't you see JFK when you were a young boy? The film?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was never allowed to see any rated R movies, and I don't know, for some reason though I was very interested in JFK in general. I don't know, I could feel his charisma as like a 7-year-old, I guess.
Totally.
My parents at the time were not even, they are now, which is funny, but they were not even Democrats. They were Republicans, so like it's not like I got it from them really. I just like somehow inherited this Massachusetts Kennedy love. And so they had never seen JFK. This literally must have been like right when this movie came to video, because that's how old I was. It was like around 8 years old. And they were like, yeah, you can watch it. It's like historical, and they didn't watch it with me either. So I just like watched this movie by myself, and like I kind of like come out of the room and I'm like, did you know that there was like a trial in the case of them? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, and I think that the CIA did it. And then, and actually Zoe, we found some evidence, I brought, like, some receipts.
His receipts. This is October issue 1992 of News from Room 31, which I guess was like your 3rd grade class.
Yes, it was.
Newspaper here. Yeah, and it's got all kinds of like wonderful, like little coloring. This is the Halloween issue. There's like coloring pages. There's like spooky poems, and then we come to Chris's article titled "His Assassination."
Wow.
Which I will now read to you. On Friday, November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy was in Dallas, Texas. At about 12:00 p.m., their car drove past the Texas School Bank Depository. I think you meant book.
You were close.
Yeah, sure.
A couple letters off.
Yeah.
An active banking warehouse when a shot rang out from a 6th-floor window. A first bullet hit JFK in the neck, a second hitting Governor Connolly, who with his wife was riding with them, and a final 3rd bullet hit Kennedy in the skull. By 1:00, the president was dead. Hours later, Dallas police abducted a suspect they were positive committed the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald. Quote, "I haven't shot anybody," insisted Oswald. The Dallas police had earlier found a rifle in the room of the 6th-floor window. They investigated the registration number. The owner, Lee Harvey Oswald. A person escaped from the Texas School Bank Depository just after Kennedy was shot. The Dallas police chief inquired who it was. Lee Harvey Oswald. 2 days after the murder, when Oswald was being interviewed by reporters and police officers and was on many TV stations. A Dallas nightclub owner named Jack Ruby pushed through the crowd and shot L.H. Oswald with a concealed revolver. "You killed the president, you rat," were his very words. The case of the JFK murder isn't closed. A person named Abraham Zapruder was filming Kennedy when he was shot. On the 3rd shot, Kennedy's head jerked back and the banking warehouse was behind them. Conclusion, there must have been a second gunman. And I also just, this is like beside the point, but I just have to show like the stylistic font choices here.
Wow. It almost looks like wingdings or something. Or
it's like,
it was that era.
It's like highlighted in black.
Like hieroglyphics.
It's like
block text. It's like this outline block text, like white on black.
He wrote that he did it as a 3rd grader, Zoe?
Me? No.
No. Chris did. Chris wrote that as a 3rd grade?
Yeah, you must have been. Yeah, you were like what? You were like.
Dude, you know more than most boomers about the assassination as a 3rd grader.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, seriously, and it's because they let me watch that movie.
Wow, you were really ahead of the curve. That's like 30 years ago, man.
Yeah, I was like Kevin Costner told me, back and to the left.
My favorite part is that it's just like in this Halloween issue, like where there's all these like poems about like spooky pumpkins and like
who killed JFK?
Just drop an absolute bombshell. Yeah, well, I guess I was the weird kid in middle school who talked about it. I was like, did you know that Oswald was mingling with pro and anti-Castro Cubans down in New Orleans? I'm like in 8th grade. They're like, dude, I don't know. Are you gonna go to the dance this weekend? Like,
guys, he defected to Russia, and then they just let him back. Do you not understand?
And that's the thing about this, man. Obviously, this is a very serious topic, and we do take it serious. But
Yeah,
overall, it's so comical how laughable the official story is. You have to laugh. You know, that's why you can laugh and joke about it, because it is such a great American farce that's been inflicted upon us for the last 60 years, and that's why I thought it was important to do an event like this. You know, and it's great to. I think it's important to keep your sense of humor about it, about everything, but you know, it is dark because this is when most Americans lost their innocence, and they really started to really question their government and the media. If you look at numbers back in 1963 compared to today about trust in media and trust in government, it's just like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's just steadily just gone down, and so that's why I think it's important to have conversations about it and do this public forum, because, like you said, there's not really many people doing any like events or anything or having real conversations about it. And that's what I want to do. I want people to show up who have different beliefs about it, who have looked at it, who have never looked at it, who are curious, who think that we're off base. I would love to see a great sampling in the crowd of,
absolutely.
of all perspectives and points of view.
As everyone knows, we love debate around here. You know? And it's an interesting time, I think, too, because polls have consistently shown over time, right, that, like, you know, somewhere between like 2/3 and 3/4 of Americans believe that like something more is true about this assassination than the official story, than the Warren report findings, et cetera, like that, and that's always been the case, right? But I think today in particular we have sort of a confluence with that prevailing sentiment, right, with this view, particularly, say, in a town like Peterborough, particularly among liberals, right, that conspiracy theorism is inherently dangerous and like inherently wrong, and it makes you a right winger, and it means that you don't trust the science and like all of these things. And so I think it becomes all the more important to show some of these things, because first of all, the thing I like to say to people when they are dismissive of the concept of conspiracy theories is, I'm like, do you think that like powerful people never plan things in rooms? You know what I mean? Like that, like they don't, you know, because like think about organizing like a bake sale, right? You probably got together with some people and like planned it. Okay. Do you think that people at like the top of say the economic or class or political ladder, however you want to frame it, don't collude, you know, don't talk to one another, like don't coordinate? Like that's nuts, right? And so if you agree that that's nuts, because it is, right, because all people do this, it's a natural human trait, right? We organize ourselves, it's universal, then you know, admit the existence of conspiracies, right? And so of course there are conspiracy theories that are ridiculous, you know, there are conspiracy theories that are dubious, right? There are conspiracy theories that are of intentionally nefarious origin, right? So the thing comes to be able to parse what conspiracies are actually real. And when it comes to this sort of thing, again, people are, even, again, like I said, despite the stats about people's doubts, right? Today, I find that people can be very dismissive of this. And there are so many things with this assassination, as we were saying, we were watching the last couple of nights JFK Revisited, which is the film we're going to be showing at the library. And there are so many individual details, right, that all by themselves would be enough to be like, wait a minute, this is not right. You know what I mean? And there's like 30 or 40 of them that are at that level. And you hear people say things like, yeah, well, do you know that nobody can keep their mouth shut? And if this was a conspiracy, then, you know, in all this time, there would have been thousands of people who knew, and a ton of people would have talked. And I'm just like, yeah, and a ton of them did. You know what I'm saying? Like,
people have talked.
Did.
Yeah. People have talked, and conspiracies are very real. Just in our lifetime, the three of us, the earliest one would be Iran-Contra. That was a conspiracy. Sure. I mean, that's government colluding with drug running, terrorism, weapons. I mean, that all happened, you know. The Iraq War was a conspiracy. You know, they got together and tried to sell us a bill of goods about weapons of mass destruction and yellow cake and uranium and anthrax, and that ended up all being a lie. They were all lies.
Mass surveillance of U.S. citizens is a conspiracy.
It's ended up being true.
Yep.
So I think to your point, especially in recent years, the QAnon stuff has thrown a lot of people off, and that's, I think, part of that is a way to get people to not look at anything and not question anything critically, because you'll be painted with that brush. Whereas in the Kennedy assassination, since day one, there has been serious scholarship and been serious criticism of the Warren report, and people on the ground interviewing witnesses and doing research and looking into this, with a sober mind. And that's the information and evidence that I try to always put forward, and guests that I have on my show who have done really great groundbreaking research on this stuff. And I think if you just peel back a layer or two on this and you look at it with an open mind, I don't know how you can come away and not think that there's something amiss with the whole deal. So there's so many areas, like you mentioned, that, on their own, there's like, well, that makes you scratch your head. But I mean, really the crux of this thing is, Lee Harvey Oswald being in that window on the 6th floor, when clearly when you look at it and you look at eyewitness statements, he was on the 2nd floor at the time of the shooting. So how was he in the 6th floor firing at the president if he was actually on the 2nd floor? So there's many discrepancies. And
like, come on, guys, too. Like, how many like world-class political assassins have ever existed who succeed at their task, and upon being caught, don't use the opportunity to proclaim why, what their cause is, right? Or alternately, don't try to proclaim innocence and get away with it, right? But say instead, specifically, I am a patsy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, why would anyone say that?
That always stuck out to me too. Yeah, I'm just a patsy. And he was begging for legal representation. And I mean, you look at him there, and we were talking about this kind of off, online the other night. The midnight press conference they did with him, where they trotted him out, and he looks really beat up and disoriented. And one of the reporters tells him, "You have been charged in the death of the president." And he just looks completely like gobsmacked.
Yeah.
He's, there's so much about it that points to him not only not being, really involved in the plot, but not being the shooter at all.
Mm-hmm.
And there never was a trial. To your point, he was killed 2 days later on live television by Jack Ruby, who has had innumerable mafia connections and weapons smuggling and had been around for a long time. And there's evidence to suggest that he was paid $50,000 to go shoot Oswald.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but the guy dying 2 days later is just like too neat and tidy. You know what I mean? Like I mean, come on, you would protect the shit out of that guy. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I mean, it's
just
ridiculous.
It's wild
to me.
They paraded him around, and there's a lot of folks in the government were saying we need to make sure Americans are convinced that Oswald was the guy. There was only one shooter. We don't want World War III to pop off. We don't want incident with Cuba. And there was just so much propaganda from the early get-go, that this was either a Cuban plot or a Russian plot, and that's, I think a lot of that's just disinformation to throw the public off the trail. That the real plotters were actually a little bit more closer to home,
Definitely.
And, Kennedy had a lot of enemies. He made a lot of enemies, and he did things that were, at the time, pretty extraordinary with foreign policy and domestic policy. He definitely disrupted the apple cart with a lot of vested interests. So
yeah, well, and that really is the crux of it, I think. And I intend to maybe say a remark or two about this in a few days as well. But I think the important thing really is it's always going to be hard, if not impossible, for us to actually have the full set of facts about like who exactly did what, who gave the order specifically, names, places, things like that, right? But the moral of the story here, right, is that this was a man who was killed because he was trying to end the Cold War. Because he was beginning to, against great resistance, right? Like truly swimming against the tide. And, sometimes people dismiss this line of thinking because they're like, no, Kennedy was just conventional. He went along with the Bay of Pigs. He sent the advisors to Vietnam and all this stuff. And like, yes, he was imperfect. I think he had a lot of like fits and starts. But in the end, the guy was going, and the more you read about this in Kennedy's thinking and his efforts against certain advisors, and of course, when you listen to his famous peace speech at American University earlier the year that he was killed, in which he, expressly was urging Americans to empathize with their enemy, like very specifically, very directly saying, we are all the same here, which was just an incredibly radical statement, and he wanted to pull the advisors out of Vietnam. He was deeply troubled by the murder of Diem, which, his administration had a hand in ultimately, right? But was ashamed and was deeply troubled by it, and was troubled by the amount of deaths of U.S. advisors who were there and could see what was going to happen, and was going to pull out of Vietnam and was going to try to do some missile treaties with Russia and was on that track. And this was unacceptable to the intelligence community, to the military, etc.
Absolutely, and he had the national security memorandum that was going to pull the troops out of Vietnam, the advisors out of Vietnam. He gave that interview, I think it was to Walter Cronkite, a month or two before he was killed, saying it's their war, it's theirs to win. We don't want to get entangled in this. And history has now borne out that that's the case, that he was intending on having everybody out of Vietnam by 1965. He wanted to go through. He needed to get reelected first, and he knew that. He had only won Texas by like 2 points, so he was really kicking off the '64 campaign by going down there with Lyndon Johnson and bringing the First Lady, his wife, down there to campaign and meet the people. So it was very important that he win a state like Texas, and that's one of the reasons why he had Lyndon Johnson on the ticket in 1960 to carry a state like Texas. And firing Allen Dulles from the CIA after the events down in Cuba that were bungled, firing Cabell and Bissell, those are two huge big fish within the military establishment that he got rid of, and was trying to clean house. And
who believed themselves like to have impunity, like that they could not be fired.
They're like,
they're indispensable.
Who's this little punk? They were looked at him like he was like a punk. Who's this little punk coming in telling us what we're going to do, and we're going to have détente with Russia?
Yeah, Christ, he was even new money, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
These were guys really attached to that WASP establishment, like old money, Wall Street money. Sullivan and Cromwell,
Absolutely, and the Dulles brothers totally connected to Wall Street, connected to moneyed interests over in Germany. David Talbot wrote a great book called The Devil's Chessboard, which really lays out Dulles really still had Nazi connections that were still going on. So he was like the fulcrum between that, Wall Street, obviously intelligence, and the Pentagon. So after Kennedy fires him, and then Kennedy's killed in '63. A week later, Johnson establishes the Warren Report by really elbowing Chief Justice Earl Warren to put his name on this thing and put his stamp on it. He didn't want to do it. Johnson basically said, "You are going to do this." Who did they hire to run the commission? Allen Dulles.
Dulles, his enemy.
He's fired by Kennedy. So
you're
bringing the guy who Kennedy fired, who he didn't trust, who Dulles hated Kennedy, and this is the guy who's going to be investigating the assassination and the death of President Kennedy. They already had their conclusion that it was Oswald, and they needed to make the story and the narrative fit around those facts, and that's what they did for the next 10 months.
Yeah, and he was there to make sure it happened.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was the cleanup and the cover-up crew. He decided what they were going to look at, what they were going to investigate. He obfuscated and hid so many things. Like, for example, a CIA agent named George Ioannidis, who was liaison with one of the Cuban groups down in Miami, and knew about Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, they opened up a file on Lee Harvey Oswald in 1959, and they were opening his mail. They were opening his mother's mail. So they knew who Oswald was. They knew what he was up to, where he was going, what groups he was involved in, and up until a couple of weeks before the assassination, they knew he was in Dallas, and so they weren't totally forthcoming about that. And there's since been a lot of information that's come out with the release of the files, which happened after the movie JFK. That was an act of Congress in 1992, and technically by law they should have all been released by 2017. Trump didn't get it done. Now Biden has also kicked it down the road and basically given it back to the CIA. So there's still probably 5,000 or more documents and files that are pertinent that may never come out.
Well, I was saying to Zoe the other night, like when we were watching the film, and they were talking about precisely that, right? And it's like that's another one of those things where it's like, okay, so the House of Representatives, the U.S. Congress investigated this assassination not that long ago, right? A little bit before, say, we were born, right? Just a few years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not ancient history. They did this investigation, and they found that many things in this investigation that we can't be told 40 years later. What? You know what I mean? Like, if not like something fishy, like there's no alternative. You know what I mean? Like, what are you saying? Like, oh well, you're gonna give bullshit like they did with like WikiLeaks and shit, being like, well, you're gonna cause people to die in Afghanistan because like no way, 40-year-old intelligence, fuck that. Like that makes no sense whatsoever. What's in there?
Yeah, that's BS. That's totally BS. And I mentioned Joe and Edie's earlier. So when they did the House Select Committee of the investigation in the 70s, I think they concluded in 1978. So yeah, it's only 8 years before I was born. And then they, kicked it to the Justice Department to investigate it, and nothing was ever followed up on, of course. But that House Select Committee concluded that there was a conspiracy and there were at least 2 shooters. That was their. So there's actually 2.
So yes, they actually publicly did conclude that. Right, you're right.
There's 2 official government conclusions. There's the Warren Report, and then there's the House Select Committee. I feel like the House Select Committee looked into more things pertaining to intelligence and what they knew about Oswald, but there were also members of that panel who had a kind of thing with the mafia and the mob, and they wanted to kind of just blame it on the mob, which I think, obviously with Jack Ruby and Sam Giancana and, other mobsters, there certainly were some connections, but
yeah.
I think that's a cop-out to just say, oh, the mob did it.
Totally.
Some people like to go that route.
Anything that like L. Fletcher Prouty talks about with respect to like the CIA and like certain safety protocols that were not followed and things like that were all things that the mob, even at the height of its power, never had the power to do. Like they can't give those orders. That's just not real.
Well, the mob wasn't in charge of the parade route in Dallas.
Right. That's what I'm saying. The mob can't do that.
No, that took it through Dealey Plaza and made that turn, which went against protocol, because presidents as far back as Roosevelt motorcaded through Dealey Plaza, and they did not make that turn onto Houston Elm. They went straight through the triple overpass. So there's great research just on the Secret Service angle. I had a fellow on named Vince Palomera who's written like 6 books just about the Secret Service response and their protocols, and he's got a great review about former Secret Service agent Paul Landis, who just released a book. They're saying, oh, this is the last witness. He's 88 years old. He said that he found a totally intact bullet behind where Jackie was sitting, and if that's the case, that totally dismantles the single bullet theory as we know it. But yeah, there's just so much information, and there is a lot of minutia, and you can get lost in the weeds in a lot of this stuff. But overall, I think that anybody who looks at it critically, will conclude that there's something wrong with the official story, and RFK Jr. is out there, man, calling for the release of the files. He's saying, he doesn't believe the official story in his uncle and his father's assassinations. So I'm really encouraged by that, and I think Americans want disclosure, they want transparency, and I think it's more relevant than ever to do an event like this and have that conversation.
Yeah, I do think that part of it is remarkable, too, because as someone who has been following this as long as I have, and someone who's been kind of, a general, like I said, typical Massachusetts, like, Kennedy fan, right? They they don't talk about this. They don't like to talk about this. Teddy would never talk about this, when he was alive. And the more you read, right? You mentioned David Talbot. He's got another great book called Brothers, which I'm sure you've probably read. Some of the things I just learned about that was like the attitudes of Jackie and Bobby in the aftermath of JFK's assassination, and they were like they knew, like, neither of them thought for 1 second that it was this Lee Harvey Oswald dude, and that the government wasn't involved. They knew. Bobby wouldn't let the Secret Service or the FBI anywhere near him. It was like he had an old Irish buddy who was running like the ATF or the Marshals. I think it was the U.S. Marshals or something, and he had him provide security because he didn't trust any of the other government agencies to do it. I mean, even Jackie famously said that she left her husband's like blood and gore on her dress because she said, I want them to see what they did to him. Like she wasn't talking about this funny like loser man, you know what I mean, in the 6th floor of the building, lone gunman, disaffected Soviet sympathizer. Like, that is not what she meant. That is not what anyone would say if that's who they were talking to, But nonetheless, though, aside from remarks like that, right, in which was immediately thereafter,
when Johnson was being sworn in,
it would never. They didn't want to go there, and I don't blame them. I'm not even casting, but it is really nice that at this remove you have someone like RFK Jr. who's just like, yeah, I'll tell you what I think, and we all know it.
Oh, just the courage to do that, and of course it's going to pain the family. I mean, like he said, he has 105 living family members and cousins and aunts and uncles, and between all the siblings, it's over 100. So, of course, there's going to be different opinions and different views on what they think happened, on what should be spoken about publicly. But I think there has been such a vacuum and such a need for someone from the family to come out publicly and say, hey, we this is what we feel about it, and let's get this out there and get to the bottom of it. So one of the reasons I'm so supportive of RFK Jr. is because of this issue and the courage and leadership he's shown in that. And it just shows you they really the media and the government, they like view us like we're children. They treat us like we're children. So
yeah, exactly. And that really whatever we can say, right, about the they're very popular today also to focus on the negative aspects of American history and the you know what I mean, the ugly side of civilization. Really, it's not just America, but like we make it about America, and that is, as an aside, that's another thing that I appreciate about RFK Jr. is that he is unafraid to love America. Which is it's crazy that we have to talk about it like that, but as a remarkable thing, but he does. But anyway, the idea that we are to be treated as children, right, is not the foundation that we started from. No. Even when we want to look at it under the worst light, right? The point of all of this here, and we see it in its vestigial form in our little New Hampshire town meetings, right? This was the basis for our government. This was the idea, was the citizen government. There shouldn't really be anything that they can't tell us about, for the most part. That's contrary to the whole idea.
Absolutely, and it's like when Jim Garrison says in JFK that it's our tax dollars; those are our files. That this belongs to the American people, not some bureaucratic organization way off in D.C. in some building walled off somewhere. It belongs to the people, And if these institutions cover up stuff like this, they lie about reasons for war, then it's like, well, where are we going? Where are we going as a democratic republic? Where are we going as a republic?
Do we have a republic? Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I think it goes back to the quote. I don't know, was it Thomas Jefferson? Dissension's the highest form of patriotism. And I agree. I love my country. I love America. Yeah. I'm very proud.
Me too.
My brother-in-law just graduated from Navy boot camp. He's in the military. And I don't want to see him sent off somewhere to some bullshit war for bullshit reasons that are just going to line the pockets of a few wealthy people who are building a summer home down in Virginia.
Yeah, to
You know,
grasp onto like the final tendrils of like the post-war American empire. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
what a hell of a thing to die for, you know?
And I just really feel like the anti-war movement kind of died after the Iraq War, and with the
It did.
election of Barack Obama, a lot of people went to sleep, and I think that's really unfortunate, and that's one of the reasons why we're in the situation we're in now, 20 years later.
Yeah, and to that point in the interval, right? I think that what is flabbergasting to me is I actually think that the ultimate kind of medium to longer term aftermath of the WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden revelations is that people gave up. You know, it wasn't
Yeah.
like there was like a brief moment of outrage, and then it was just kind of like, well, you know, fuck it, we can't control them. That, you know, like it was a total surrender on the part of the populace on that notion that we are entitled to know and that we are not to be spied upon and that they can't do things as a separate entity from us, as if we are, you know what I mean? Like that's contrary to the entire basis of the nation and the form of government and liberal democracy as a whole. But we've
And
given up.
a lot of people are afraid to speak out too, guys. I mean,
Yeah.
self-censorship is a real thing, man. It's unfortunately a real thing, you know, which is sad. But
It is.
I still think we live in a beautiful country. We really do live in a beautiful country, and I've loved seeing when you guys did your trip there, all the states you visited and all the cool stuff you photographed. And
It's a
to me,
beautiful
that's part of what it's all about. I mean,
It's a wonderful
we
country.
live in this country where there's almost several different countries within the country. I mean, I was in Texas earlier this year.
Yeah.
And I love Texas.
Texas is a cool place.
I love the people down there, man. One of my best friends lives down there with his family, and the barbecue. We were talking about I mean, this whole country has so many cool things, and most people are inherently good, and they care, and they're helpful, and they're proud of their families and their friends and their communities. But there's just something that's happened where so much of our society has been, you know, corporatized, and it's been kind of, I don't know, we've been beaten down in a lot of ways. Our spirits have been beaten down by this permanent warfare state and the surveillance state and all the bad news that we see on the corporate media every day. That's why I don't watch the news. I haven't watched MSNBC or Fox or CNN, or I got rid of cable in 2009. I don't look at that stuff. I mean, obviously, I want to pay attention to what's going on, but I don't need them to tell me what to think or what the news is. I try to read as much as I can in different sources and then suss it out between the lines. But it's a lot of fear-based stuff. And certainly in the last 3 years, we've seen fear be a powerful tool to silence and to, you know, ice dissenting voices. So that's why I think it's more important than ever and incumbent on us to keep talking about things like this. Because if we don't, eventually no one's going to talk about it, and it's just we'll just be living in our metapods, you know, our AI metapods, not caring about this stuff.
Yeah, no, you're right. And actually, something you just said made me a little concerned because, you know, I do have this, like, you know, well-known affinity for Morning Joe, right? But I don't want anybody who sees my love of Morning Joe to ever come away with the impression that you should get your information from that show.
Oh no,
you know?
I mean him and
I watch that
Mika,
program because I want to know what they think, you know, because they're my favorite fake 1950s family that's a mouthpiece for the intelligence industry, you know?
I love it. It's entertaining.
Yeah, it's entertaining, and they will just straight up tell you what the official line is today.
They don't even try to hide it anymore. They have generals on. They have intelligence people on.
Some of those guys, God, they've been there since the Iraq War days, like Barry McCaffrey. They bring on Colonel Jack Jacobs, you know, the same goddamn intelligence mouthpieces from 20 years ago. Same guys. Except now they've added people, you know, they got like the John Brennans, you know, they got, you know, people like that. It was just like, you know, that's the head of the CIA saying that thing, you know, or it's Richard Haas, you know, the former president of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yeah,
I do want to know what he thinks, but don't listen to that man, you know.
Well, that should become your gospel, and that's the problem. You get people on the right who think Fox News and like OAN and like Mike Lindell is their godhead. Then you got people on the left who think that like the Washington Post and New York Times, MSNBC and CNN are the gospel. And I say to all of them, great, watch all that, but please look at something else. Read Whitney Webb's research. Look at independent media like Jason Burmis or Mint Press News or The Intercept, although The Intercept not so much these days.
Yeah, The Intercept is a little bit, but Matt Taibbi does a good job still on The Racket. Glenn Greenwald is still doing a really good job.
As cartoonish as Tucker is, and his father was intelligence, look at what Tucker's saying too. Look at what everybody's saying, and
Tucker says a lot of true things.
At least he apologized for his awful take on the Iraq. He was a cheerleader for the Iraq War.
I remember,
and I was not a fan of his.
Too.
Yeah, and he was a real mouthpiece, and apparently he was on a lot of cocaine when he was doing Crossfire. That came out too.
Not surprised.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
But and you know what, people can change, but also a lot of what people espouse depends on their paycheck too. So that comes into play. So I guess the takeaway is, everybody use your own discernment and make up your own mind and try not to let some corporation do your thinking for you, which is getting increasingly harder day by day. And everything that we consume, from television to what we learn in school to the news to the films that we watch, and even some of the books that we read. So, I saw you post about the Beatles there, about the new Beatles song, and your point. I'm in a band, and most of the guys in my band agree with what you said about it. And to me, what's that?
My conspiracy theory that is not really founded on anything but intuition is that it is an AI fake song completely.
Right. Yeah. I've heard, and it's funny. I joke with my brother because we are huge Beatles. I mean, I've been a massive Beatles fan since.
I like the Beatles. Don't get me wrong.
But at the same time, they're not the gospel either, and they're not beyond criticism. And there's conspiracy theories that the Beatles is just all like a Tavistock mind control thing. All the girls screaming at the shows, it's all staged. They didn't write their own music. I've deep dived all that stuff.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
And then there's also stuff about the whole Laurel Canyon scene. We can get into that when I have you guys on. But my point is that doesn't take away from how good the music is and how much I love the music and the songs. But with the new one, the cynical thing is the report in the media about AI being involved. And from what I understand, they used an AI program to separate John Lennon's vocals from the piano, which was on the demo track he recorded in 1977 at the Dakota. And so they were left with Lennon's actual vocals, and then Paul and Ringo recorded all the new stuff, and they had guitar tracks from George in the 90s. But is it possible the whole thing's an op? Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. But
I mean, the fact that it's called Now and Then, it's just too perfect. It's just, I don't know. There's it's just something doesn't ring true about it.
It does seem a little too perfect.
Well, it's funny. There's a couple of things about it that you read and you're like, are they pulling my leg or what? Like, one thing is, so famously when they got together in the 90s for the anthology to reunite, obviously Lennon had been dead for 14, 15 years. Yoko gave Paul a tape that had Real Love and Free as a Bird and Now and Then on it.
Okay, it was on that tape. I was just saying this last night. Like, why did they do those other two songs at that time and not that one?
Well, so they started, according to the official story, they started working on Now and Then, and George thought it was garbage. And he didn't like it.
Was they to wait till he died?
George didn't like it. Oh, it's garbage. I don't like it. And apparently he recorded some guitar tracks. But the problem was they didn't have the technology to clean up John's vocals. So that's why they had to wait till years later for Peter Jackson.
Sounds true to me either, though. Like,
hey, I'm just going on the official Beatles cover. I'm being the Beatles cover-up artist for this one.
Yeah, but, right. Yeah. You're on their side.
I'm a John Lennon apologist. John's my favorite Beatle. I have a real affinity for John Lennon, and the Beatles. But yeah, I mean, you hear conflicting reports about stuff, and at the end of the day, that's a cash monster like Apple and they got the Cirque du Soleil stuff, and who knows in 10 years if someone's like, oh, look what I found in a drawer. I found this unreleased Beatles album. And then, who knows? Who knows? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's fun, though. It's fun to talk about. And I had a fellow on my show named David Whelan who's got a book and a documentary coming out about the Lennon assassination called Give Me Some Truth.
Oh, interesting.
I never really looked too deeply into Lennon's shooting. I think, and this is probably like a lot of people with that and with the Kennedy assassination, it's very difficult to look at because it is an emotional thing. It's awful to face. But there's stuff about Lennon's death that's pretty fishy too. And David Whelan's done a 3-year investigation into it, and he's going to be releasing his book this month. So I'll be interested. And I had him on the show too.
I'd like to check that one out.
Yeah, it was an interesting chat. If you guys want to have him on, I could probably give you his contact info if you ever want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, I'll definitely check out your interview though for sure. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm really looking forward to the event, guys. You know.
Me too. Me too. Yeah, I feel like this is a good place to wrap it.
Wait, I just want to bring up one more thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Like, so obviously I don't have like the deep like Kennedy knowledge that you guys have, but I wanted to ask you.
You were doing other things in middle school, apparently.
I was like pretty obsessed with the Beatles, honestly. Like.
Oh, well, I want to hear all your Beatles theories, Zoe.
But I wanted to ask you though, in case this is something I've like asked a couple of people about recently. When I was in high school, we had to watch a couple of times this like, it was like definitely like a made for school film. It was about a kid who was running for class president, and he was obsessed with JFK, and like he had left like a research paper to the last minute, and the school, it was like a teaching research skills. Like this was the first time I ever heard about microfilm. Like I just remember that detail. Like he had to go to the library and like use microfilm to write his paper. And it was about like the Bay of Pigs and like how Kennedy like had, you know, this like dark time, but then, you know, he like got himself out of it. And it was like this kid was having his dark time, like not having finished his research paper, but he got himself out of it. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, did you watch this? I want to find this again. I can't find any trace of it on the internet when I like looked this up, but I remember it very vividly.
I don't think I've ever seen that. No, that sounds fascinating though. It sounds like something I'd like to see.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I've never heard of it either though.
It's like a half hour, like watch this in your history class before you learn how to write a research paper type deal.
Unless it's like a giant Mandela effect thing for you, you know, like
I feel like I saw it twice.
We saw the Publishers Clearinghouse checks. We all saw them, you know.
Right.
But we didn't. the Mandela effect, right? Stuff that we.
Wait, is that a thing we did? Like we didn't see the Publishers Clearinghouse?
Yeah, that's not a real thing.
Supposedly, that's part of the Mandela effect. Supposedly.
I know.
I saw those checks.
I
saw those checks.
We all did.
Wasn't it Ed McMahon going to people's house?
They erased that too.
They erased that. With the Berenstein Bears.
Oh, the logos, all kinds of stuff.
Didn't they would knock on people's door with a check.
They've been fucking with us our whole lives, guys. Let's just go to Infowars.com, Prison Planet. Yeah, we're fighting a demon like Kamala Harris.
Yes, that's another one. I remember that cornucopia.
Yeah, that was. Somebody was telling me that's how they learned what a cornucopia was.
Was the Fruit of the Loom cornucopia that doesn't exist.
Is not real.
Yeah.
Isn't that the underwear, right?
Yeah.
There's a cornucopia in that logo, right?
Absolutely.
No. Never was, apparently, they say. All right, we got a lot to talk about when we come on to your show.
Yeah, we'll do it like a happy hour. We'll do it like 5, 6 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly. We thought about being real alcoholics, but instead we decided to go like the Ben Affleck, J-Lo route.
I love that motif. You guys are like totally cosmo and worldly and cultured, but you also love Dunkins, and I really love that about you guys.
That's right.
Because I'm with you.
My roots, man.
America runs on Dunkin', you know?
That's right. That's right. So event is this Friday night in the 1833 room of the Peterborough Town Library, 7 o'clock to 10 p.m. Do you remember if we're allowed to like BYOB at a private event at the library?
I have no idea.
Well,
I don't want to speak to that.
Bring some, and we won't stop you. And if someone officially is there to stop you, we can't speak to that. But I don't know if Corinne will listen to this far in the episode.
We'll do a flask in honor of Uncle Teddy.
Exactly.
You know,
I was at his final victory speech, Ted Kennedy.
I saw Teddy speak too. So when would that have been? 08 or 06 or?
Yeah, I think it was 06. I think it was 06. Yeah.
I saw him in Nashua or Manchester campaigning for John Kerry in 2004.
Cool.
So I saw him and Teresa Hines in person.
Nice. Yeah, I like Steady. I don't care what anybody says.
Oh, Uncle Ted?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about Chappaquiddick and that film that came out a couple years ago, and senatorial privilege, and there's all kinds of stuff with that too. I mean, he went on TV and said, "Hey, it's up to the Massachusetts voters if you want to reelect me." And guess what? They kept reelecting him every time.
I know.
Right?
I know. Seriously, democracy at work. I'll leave the viewers with one final piece of good advice, though. Going back to some of the things we were saying earlier, and hopefully you can make it to the event, and we'll talk about this some more, regardless of where you fall on these issues. But I think that the number one thing that's important for all of us to do, we were talking about the media and different sources and how we get our information, how we form our worldview and stuff. It's like, it's very common today, I feel like, for otherwise intelligent and educated people to be like, well, I'm not an expert, so I cannot form an independent opinion based on what I think and what I read. And that's horseshit. Let your this sounds cheesy, but let your conscience be your guide. Like, if something feels right and something, you should read the news not based on like what you think, the line of your party is or whatever, but like, how does that sit with you? How does that match up with your values and your morals? How does that all shake out? And that should really inform what you think, much more than what some commentator says or Heather Cox Richardson, historical mumbo jumbo, whatever else you're going to read. Trust your conscience. And that is the final piece of good advice for today. Happy Saturday, happy Veterans Day, happy Diwali, and we will see you Friday night. Until then, continue to take advice. And thank you very much, Mike, for coming on. We will definitely do. We'll come on your show and we'll have a nice time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been fun. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.